and welcome to January's block for the Aurifil Colour Builders 2022, and this is the gorgeous box of thread that is included in January's Colour Builders subscription, and it has 3 spools of thread, 2 of which are variegated. My third one is up here already loaded, ready to go. And one's coloured, so two variegated and 1 solid colour. Now I'm just setting up my machine. I've got a pretty whizzy machine. I'm very lucky. So I've just set it up to do free motion quilting, and that required me to change the plate to my straight stitching plate, and also to change the foot to, I think it's called like a darning foot or something, and it has, allows it to go up and down. I've also got out my quilting gloves, which just helps me hold things. And over here, I've got my block, and I've already basted the 3 layers. So my backing, my wadding, and the block. And I'm going to do each block like this as a quilt as you go to show you a quilting motif. But I'm using the same background on all of my blocks. So I have actually put in the 3rd of the spools from January, which is this grey variegated, and it's quite a darkish grey interspersed with some lighter bits, and that's going to go quite beautifully with the grey that I've chosen for my background, or for my backing. So I'm just going to pop that aside, because the first thing you should do when you sit down to do some free motion quilting before you start working on your block is, if you haven't done any free motion quilting on your domestic for a little while, just to put in a little test piece and actually just play. Getting to a good speed that isn't super fast but isn't also super slow, and keeping a consistent motion with your hands is really important. Now, because I'm a long arm quilter, I don't do quilting on my domestic anymore, but so I've just done a quick little test piece, and it came back to me pretty quickly. So I am ready to go. So get yourself set up, and we'll come back and we'll start work on the actual block. Okay, so here we are. I've got January's 12-inch block. If you're a subscriber to the Aurifil Colour Builders 2022 with me, you will have received the instructions on how to create this block, and also this quilting motif that I'm about to show you. Now, I have selected the darker thread, the darker variegated thread out of the 3 to do these darker blades of my block, and then I'll swap out and I'll use some of the other threads to do the rest of the block. Okay, I am all ready. I'm set up. So let's go. Now, the thing you need to do when you're doing quilt as you go, because the back is going to show, we've already got our backing already on here, we need to do the good thing and bring up our thread from the bottom so that it is up on the top, so that we can easily either bury the threads if you want to be really, really cool, or what I do is just make sure that I stitch up and down in the one spot for a couple of stitches to lock that stitch before I start my long arm, my free motion. So my machine, when I press my presser foot, it automatically just does 1 stitch, which allows me to bring up my thread, and I can pop that under there to try and grab it out. And so then I've got my 2 threads, my bobbin thread and my top thread. Now I'm going to start in the middle of the block. Now, the beauty of doing free motion on your domestic is that you can move your block, which I kind of forget because I'm always working on my long arm. So I'm thinking it might be easier to actually work my motif towards me rather than trying to do this block back here, which I can't see, of course. So let's get going. I'm just going to hold those threads. Okay, so I've done those few locking stitches, so I'm actually just going to flip up my foot and try and just grab that thread out a bit further. And as soon as we move further away, maybe when I get down to my next sort of logical stopping spot, I'll trim those threads before I come back over them. Okay, so here we go. Especially if I put my foot back down. Okay, so there's my logical stopping spot. Now, because I'm on a domestic and I can turn it around, I'm going to, because I like to be able to see where I'm going. Now, as I said, I'm going to just trim those starting threads. Because I did that locking stitch, they're not going anywhere, so I can get rid of those. And we're then going to come back in another arc back to that middle point. Make sure my foot's down. So you can, well, maybe you can't. I'll show a bit closer view later. But the variegated thread, it's sort of gone from a darkish grey to a midish grey to a quite light grey, which I think just adds to the whole depth of your project. So what we want to do now is move on to the next darker grey petal. Now, obviously, being consistent is important. I perhaps didn't quite swing out as far on that one, but when it's all said and done, it's not going to matter terribly much. Okay, third blade. Okay, so there's my 4 blades of the darkish grey have been done. So I wanted to change threads to use one of the lighter ones, so I'll be back in a moment. Now, one thing, just in case you didn't know, is when you're opening a brand new spool of the larger spools of Aurifil, take the plastic off, you can actually take off the base and your starting thread will be wound around the base. Now, sometimes it does catch, like I did there, the actual end of it as well. So I just pop that back in. It's going to go back underneath the foot anyway, but there you've got your start of your thread. So I've now just changed thread, and I'm going to do the lighter grey variegated on these petals or blades of my block. So always forget to put that presser foot down. Turning it around. Okay, so there we've done all of our blades or petals of our blocks. So I'll just do a couple of locking stitches and cut my thread. Now, with me cutting my thread, there is a little tail left on the other side, which I'm just going to trim before so I don't have to worry about that. Okay, so now we need to look at doing something in these outer background pieces. Now, if I was on my long arm, I'd be doing some stitch in the ditch and some ruler work. My Whizzy machine does actually have the ability to do ruler work, but I've never done it on a domestic, so I'm not going to try and show you how to do that. I'm just going to do a bit more free motion, and we might do a little bit of stitch near the ditch, which I think is a bit easier to do than actually stitching in the ditch. And what I might do is swap over to my walking foot, because we're just going to be doing some straight stitching from now on rather than the curves of the blades. And that can be a wonderful way to do a lot of quilting with your walking foot. Okay, so I've swapped back and I've put my walking foot back on. I've lifted my feed dogs. So I forgot to mention to you to do that when you're doing your free motion. Your feed dogs go down. And I'm actually going to start removing my basting pins as well, because now that we've done a bit of the quilting, it's not going to be going terribly far, and I want to be able to get my walking foot in there nice and easily. Okay, so I'm going to start over just on one side, and I'm going to come in that little seam, because that's our 1/4 inch, which once we put this block with the other blocks, you won't see, but I'm going to come in that seam so that I can get onto this seam here, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch, or as I said, stitch near the ditch. And I've increased my stitch length just a little bit than my normal piecing stitch length. I piece my blocks at about a 1.8. I've got it at a 2.5 at the moment. Now, I'm going to try and get as close as possible to my seam, but I'm going to probably err on being this side rather than in the actual block piece. So excuse me if I get into camera a bit as I get a bit closer, so I can make sure I'm seeing what I'm doing. And with variegated thread, we will see it, because obviously it changes colour and it's not an exact match with that. But I don't think that's a problem. I'm celebrating the quilting today. Okay, now what I would like to do is then come back and do some sort of echo quilting, so that I'm going to come back, and we've got a lovely seam line here in the piecing, come back to a certain point and then go over to this corner again and perhaps come back once more, so that we've basically done a few passes. Now, probably the easiest way to do this is to use some sort of marking tool. If I had a ruler next to me, that would be handy. I don't. I might just have to make do. I've got some tape on here, so I might use that. So I'm going to just mark, and this is an air erasable pen, so as long as I don't take it to the ironing board, which will solidify it and just let it disappear over time, and by time it's like less than 10 minutes, then those marks will disappear and I won't ever see them, but they'll stay long enough so that I can use them. So I've just marked 3 points, and I'm going to come straight as I can to that point, and then to here, back again, and then we can move on and we can work on this corner block. If you're concerned that your straight line's not going to be straight because you haven't got anything to follow, you can use the air erasable or a chalk pencil or something else that will come out to actually draw the line if you like. I'm fairly okay with doing a straightish line. They're never going to be perfectly straight, but a straight-ish. See there, that one wasn't absolutely perfectly straight, but it's still going to look fine. And I'm going to turn around and I'm going to come back to this second point. Or close to. And then we're just going to come round and come back to this third point. Just come off. And there we have our triangle. So we've done stitch in the ditch around here, and then we've gone to our 3 marked places to give sort of a lovely geometric, and it really focuses your vision in towards the main part of your block, which is the whole idea. So now we're going to work on this corner section. Okay, so we're going to do a quite similar looking to here, but because it's a smaller little triangle, we're only going to do 2 of these blocks. So first of all, we're going to do our stitch in the ditch or stitch near the ditch. And that just gives a lovely definition to the inside of your block. Okay, so this is a little bit more tricky in that we don't have a bit of piecing here to know where to stop. So where's my ruler? So in this case, I will draw sort of a bit of a line or a bit of a spot to mark my spot, so that I'm going to continue this line and to the corner point, and that gives me the spots where I want to do. And I'm just going to, yeah, we'll do that spot and that spot. Okay, so we've got our little marks. And what I might do first is do my stitch in a ditch along here, because I haven't got a pin in this one, so it's still a bit loose. So I think that might be the safest way to do that first. So I'm going to do my stitch near the ditch across here. Turn it around, and then I can get ready to do my straight line to this point. Or as close as possible. And we're aiming for that second point. And back to this corner. And we're just going to come off our block. And there we have our little corner square as well. So again, this background, these triangles are pointing our focus towards the middle of the block. Now, I'm still of two minds as to whether to do anything in this little green corner. It's, I mean, it's not particularly large, so, you know, when it gets sewn in, it'll be like that. I'm personally thinking we might leave it and it'll just be nice and clean. So now all I need to do is repeat these two on all of the other blocks. Don't worry, I'll speed it up for you. Okay, so I'm just going to come off my block and cut my thread. And here we have done all the sides of the block, including the central part. Now I'm quite happy with leaving my little corners unquilted, but if you want to, feel free to pop something in there. But what I am going to do at this very last bit is do what I call a victory lap, and actually less than 1/4 of an inch, so more like 1/8 of an inch, right around the edge, just so with my walking foot all the way around, and that just holds it all together and these don't flop up anymore, and it will keep the block all nice and square and straight until we get a chance to put them all together at the end of the year. And there we have our finished 12-inch block for January's Aurifil Colour Builders.